The smell of fuel, the roar of engines, the shimmering heat rising off the tarmac, Monza on May 20th, 1973, was alive with energy. Italy's Temple of Speed had always been a place of glory and heartbreak, a track where legends were crowned and lives were risked with every lap. On that Sunday, fans crowded the grandstands for the 250cc Grand Prix, their hearts eager for battle. Among the riders, two names carried the weight of the crowd's anticipation: Renzo Pasolini, the fearless Italian hero with movie star charisma, and Jarno Saarinen, the Finnish prodigy who had taken the world by storm. No one could have foreseen that by the end of the day, both men would be gone, victims of one of the darkest tragedies in motorcycle racing history. Renzo Pasolini was more than just a racer. To Italians, he was a symbol of passion, style, and defiance. With his tousled hair, rugged charm, and flamboyant character, he looked like he belonged on a movie poster as much as on the starting grid. But beneath that persona was a rider of remarkable talent, a man who raced with courage that bordered on recklessness. He never won a world championship, yet he was adored by fans for his sheer determination and his ability to make a motorcycle dance on the edge of control. Pasolini's battles with the great Giacomo Agostini were the stuff of legend, contests of speed and daring that captured the imagination of Italy and beyond. To many Italians, Pasolini was the rebel they loved to cheer for, the man who could take the fight to Agostini and stand toe-to-toe with the very best. Jarno Saarinen, by contrast, was the cool revolutionary. Nicknamed the Flying Finn, he brought a new riding style to Grand Prix racing, hanging off the bike in ways no one had seen before. His approach looked almost awkward to traditionalists, but it was the future. He had a background in engineering, and he applied that analytical mind to his racing, meticulously preparing his machines and studying every corner. His technique would later become the blueprint for modern racing, but in 1973, it was a revelation. Saarinen was calm where Pasolini was fiery, calculated where Pasolini was instinctive. Yet together, they represented the bright, beating heart of a sport that was both intoxicating and unforgiving. By 1973, Saarinen had already captured the 250cc World Championship and was on the cusp of challenging Agostini in the premier 500cc class. Many saw him as the man destined to break Ago's dominance, the rider who could usher in a new era. He had begun the season brilliantly, winning the first three 500cc races, and his confidence was soaring. Pasolini, meanwhile, was riding for Harley-Davidson in the 250 class, the American manufacturer trying to break into the European-dominated scene with Italian talent at the helm. Both men entered Monza with expectation on their shoulders, though for vastly different reasons. The 250cc race should have been a celebration of speed and talent, but whispers in the paddock already hinted at danger. Riders muttered about oil left on the track from a prior crash. Concerns about Monza's safety were not new. It was a circuit built for sheer speed, with long straights and fast, sweeping corners bordered by unforgiving guardrails. Runoff areas were minimal, gravel traps non-existent. The track demanded bravery, and bravery was in no short supply among the riders of the day. But there was a sense, even before the flag dropped, that something was not right. When the race began, the pack thundered into the first laps, engines screaming at the limits of mechanical endurance. Pasolini, as always, attacked with ferocity, riding on instinct, fighting every corner as if it were his last. Saarinen glided with his smooth, methodical style, a man in complete control, the kind of rider who made danger look effortless. But as they approached the Curva Grande, tragedy unfolded. Pasolini's Harley-Davidson suddenly faltered. Some witnesses swore they saw smoke, others claimed the engine seized without warning. Later investigations suggested a mechanical failure, though others blamed oil on the track. Whatever the cause, the outcome was immediate and horrific. Pasolini was thrown from his bike, sliding violently across the tarmac, his motorcycle tumbling into the path of those behind. Saarinen, directly in his slipstream, had no chance to avoid the wreckage. At over 150 miles per hour, he struck Pasolini's fallen machine, was catapulted into the air, and smashed into the guardrail with brutal force. The pack behind scattered in chaos. riders swerving desperately, some falling, others narrowly escaping. For a few seconds, the scene was pure bedlam, a storm of machines, debris, and bodies. When it was over, two of the sport's brightest lights lay still on the Monza asphalt. Renzo Pasolini was dead at just 34. Jarno Saarinen, the great hope of Finland and perhaps of the entire sport, was gone at 27. The silence that followed was suffocating. In the stands, thousands of Italian fans struggled to process what they had witnessed. For many, the sight of Pasolini lying motionless was a national tragedy. He was not just a rider, but an idol, a man who carried their hopes onto the track. To lose him in front of their eyes was unbearable. The grief deepened when it became clear that Saarinen, the sport's rising genius, had also been killed. The paddock was in shock. Riders, mechanics, and officials walked in stunned disbelief. The race was stopped, but the damage had already been done. News of the crash spread quickly across the world. Newspapers carried front-page images of the wreckage, headlines screaming of disaster at Monza. The Italian press mourned Pasolini as a fallen hero, a man who had given his life to the sport he loved. In Finland, Saarinen's death hit like a hammer. He had been the pride of his nation, a symbol of possibility in a sport dominated by Italians, Brits, and Spaniards. To lose him so young, so violently, was a national heartbreak. The debate over what caused the accident raged on. Some argued it was Pasolini's Harley-Davidson that failed, its engine seizing and throwing him off. Others insisted that oil on the track had caused the crash. Whatever the truth, the consensus was that the race should not have started under such conditions. Riders had raised concerns, but their voices were ignored. Safety had been treated as a nuisance, secondary to the spectacle, and now the price had been paid in blood. The deaths of Pasolini and Saarinen forced the motorcycle racing world to confront a brutal reality. This was not just another accident, not just the accepted risk of a dangerous sport. It was a tragedy that exposed systemic negligence. Riders began to demand more protection, more attention to safety. Journalists questioned the governing bodies, asking why warnings had been dismissed. Fans, once content to accept danger as part of the bargain, began to question the cost of their entertainment. Change, however, was slow. In the 1970s, Grand Prix motorcycle racing remained perilous, with fatalities far too common. Circuits like Monza were altered in the years that followed, adding chicanes to reduce speeds, but the sport's broader safety revolution would take time. Yet Monza 1973 remained a turning point, a moment when the facade cracked and the world could no longer pretend that the danger was acceptable. For Pasolini's family, the loss was personal and devastating. He had been a father, a husband, and a national figure. His fans remembered him as the swashbuckling Italian, the man who fought ago with flair, the rider who represented the romantic heart of the sport. He never wore the crown of world champion, but to those who loved him, that mattered little. He was their champion in spirit. Saarinen's memory, meanwhile, became bittersweet. He was the man who should have gone on to dominate, the man who could have reshaped the sport for decades. Instead, his name became a symbol of potential cut short. His pioneering riding style lived on, adopted by future generations, a silent legacy of what he might have achieved. Nearly 50 years later, the memory of Monza 1973 still lingers like a scar. For those who were there, it was a moment of collective trauma, a day when joy turned to sorrow in an instant. For newer fans, it stands as a haunting story from an era when motorcycle racing was both beautiful and brutal. Pasolini's name endures in Italy, spoken with reverence, his image captured in photographs that show his rugged charisma. Saarinen's name endures globally as the rider who never got his chance to fulfill his destiny, but whose influence remains etched in every modern racer's style. Racing has always carried risk, and it always will. But it is because of men like Pasolini and Saarinen that the sport eventually began to demand better. Their deaths were not in vain. They were catalysts for progress, reminders that talent and passion deserve protection, that heroes should not be sacrificed so carelessly. Today, when riders walk away from crashes that would once have been fatal, it is in part because of the lessons written in tragedy at Monza. On that Sunday in May 1973, two of the brightest lights in motorcycle racing were extinguished in the same instant. But their legacy burns on, carried in the memory of fans, in the safer circuits of today, and in the very style of racing that Saarinen helped create. Pasolini's last ride was not just an ending, it was a statement about the fragility of greatness. Saarinen's fall was not just a loss, it was a reminder that progress must never come too late. Their story is part of the DNA of the sport, a tragic chapter that ensured the future would be different. If you manage to watch the story till the end and believe that legends like Pasolini and Saarinen deserve to be remembered, then make sure to hit the like button so more racing fans can discover their history. And if you want more powerful stories from motorsport's past, tales of triumph, tragedy, and transformation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss the next chapter.